Half a year after my daughter vanished, her number sent a message again. The location, my late husband's office. Inside, a phone was still charging, with her last voicemail playing. In that moment, I realized, I am happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and tell me from which city you are watching so I can see how far my story has reached. I am Mary Jensen. I am 62 years old, and my life fell apart when my phone vibrated that night in March. I had gone exactly 6 months without a proper night's sleep. 6 months dragging around a guilt that was eating me alive. 6 months asking myself if I could have done something different to prevent my daughter Eileen from disappearing without a trace. It was almost midnight when the message arrived. I was in the kitchen, holding a cup of chamomile tea that had already gone cold, when I heard the familiar WhatsApp sound. My heart stopped when I saw the name on the screen. Eileen, my love. Good night, Mum. My hands trembled so much I almost dropped the phone. Those 3 simple words cut through me like a dagger. For 6 months I had waited for some sign, anything to tell me my daughter was alive. But now that I had it in front of me, I could not process it. I immediately dialed her number, straight to voicemail, as always. I tried calling again and again. Nothing. But the message was there, real, with the timestamp. 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes ago. I tapped the location option with shaking fingers. The app loaded slowly, and when the pin appeared on the map, the air went out of my lungs. The address it showed was Industrial Street 534, the old office of my late husband, Robert. Robert had died of a heart attack 8 months ago, 2 months before Eileen disappeared. We had closed his auto repair shop and had never gone back there. The place was abandoned, waiting for us to make the decision to sell it. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling as if the world was spinning around me. How was it possible that Eileen's phone was at her father's office? For all these months, the police had tracked her last known whereabouts to the downtown bus station, where cameras showed her boarding a bus toward the neighboring city. After that, nothing. I reread the message over and over, looking for any detail that would give me a clue. But it was so simple, so normal. Good night, Mum. Something Eileen had told me thousands of times during her 28 years of life. Something I would not hear again. Or so I had thought until tonight. The guilt crushed me again like a giant wave. The last few days before her disappearance had been tense between us. Eileen had been strange, nervous, asking questions about Robert that I did not know how to answer. Questions about his finances, about the business, about papers she claimed to have found. I was so lost in my own grief that I did not give her the attention she deserved. Mum, did Dad ever talk to you about other projects? She had asked me one afternoon while we were tidying Robert's things. About other bank accounts or partnerships? I told her no, that her father had always been very reserved about business. Which was true. Robert handled everything related to the shop, and I took care of the house and my small bakery business. I never stuck my nose in his business, but now, sitting on my bed with that impossible message on the screen, I wondered if I should have paid more attention, if I should have listened more to Eileen instead of asking her to respect the mourning period. Half angry, half scared. She was carrying a small backpack and told me she was going to her friend Kathy's house for a few days, that she needed space to think. It did not seem strange to me. We all process loss differently. But Kathy called me 3 days later, asking if I knew where Eileen was, because she had never arrived at her house. I got up and walked toward the window, looking at the empty street illuminated by the streetlights. The neighborhood was in total silence, as if it were the only place in the world where stillness still existed. But my mind roared with 1,000 questions. Had Eileen been at Robert's office this whole time? Was it possible she had found something there that forced her to hide? Or did someone else have her phone and was playing a cruel trick on me? I checked the message again. Eileen's profile picture was still the same, a selfie she had taken on my 61st birthday, smiling next to the chocolate cake I had made for myself. Her connection status showed last seen a long time ago, but the message was new. It had just arrived. I decided I could not wait until morning. I needed to go to that office right now, even if it was midnight, even if I had to break the lock. I needed to know what was going on. I dressed quickly in the first thing I found, old jeans and a long-sleeved shirt. I grabbed the car keys and my purse, stopping only to grab a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The drive to Robert's office felt endless. Every red light seemed to last an eternity. Every empty street reminded me how alone I was in this world since Robert died and Eileen disappeared. I drove with my hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing irregularly. Industrial Street was completely dark when I arrived. Businesses closed early in that area, and at night it became a ghostly place. Robert's shop was at the end of the block, a small brick building with a faded sign that still read, Robert's Repairs. I parked in front of the entrance and sat for a few minutes, trying to calm my breathing. The building looked exactly the same as the last time I had been there. Dirty windows, peeling paint, the metal door secured with a padlock we had put on ourselves. But there was something different. A very faint light was filtering from under the door. I got out of the car with trembling legs. That line of light under the door hypnotized and terrified me at the same time. 8 months had passed since Robert's death, 6 since Eileen's disappearance, and no one had the keys to this place except us. I approached the main door and noticed something that chilled my blood. The padlock was on, but not locked. It was hanging from the staple as if someone had wanted to pretend the place was secured, but had forgotten to close it completely. I pushed the metal door, and it opened with a squeak that cut the silence of the night. The familiar smell of the shop hit me immediately. Motor oil, rusty metal, and something else. Something like dampness and abandonment. The light was coming from the small office Robert had in the back, where he kept the business papers and took his breaks. I walked between the empty spaces where cars used to be repaired, feeling as if I were profaning a grave. The office door was ajar. With my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, I pushed it open gently. What I saw inside took my breath away. On Robert's desk, connected to a charger I had never seen before, was Eileen's phone. The screen was on, showing the conversation with me. Our message exchange, with my reply that I had sent in the car. Eileen, where are you? Please answer me. But there were no more replies from her. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. It was warm, as if it had been in recent use. The battery showed 95%. Someone had been charging it, keeping it running. I checked the messages. The one I had received was the only one that appeared in our chat since her disappearance. But when I opened the main menu, I saw something that left me breathless. There were 87 recorded voice messages, all unsent, all addressed to me. All. 87 messages my daughter had recorded, but had never sent me. With shaky fingers, I played the first one. Eileen's voice filled the silent office, and I had to hold onto the desk to keep from falling. Mum, I don't know how to tell you this. I found something about Dad, something I don't understand. There are papers here in his office, documents that talk about money we didn't know he had. Mum, I think Dad lied to us about a lot of things. I paused the recording, feeling the world wobble beneath my feet. Eileen sounded scared, confused. The recording was dated 2 days before her disappearance. I played the next message. Mum, I found a safe behind the filing cabinet. Inside there is cash. a lot of cash. And there are documents for properties we don't know about, a house in the suburbs, land. Mum, where did all this money come from? The shop never made that much. My breathing became uneven. Robert had always told me we barely made enough to live comfortably. He never mentioned additional properties or large amounts of money saved. The third message devastated me. Mum, there's something else. I found receipts, invoices. It looks like Dad had dealings with people we don't know. There are names here, phone numbers, and some have notes that say things like pending and remember to call. One of the papers has an address, and it says second family. Mum, I don't understand what this means, but I'm scared. Second family. The words resonated in my head like a painful echo. I sat in Robert's chair, the very chair where he sat every day to drink his coffee and check his notes, and I felt as if I were meeting a stranger. I continued playing the messages. Eileen's voice grew more desperate, more frightened with each recording. Mum, I called one of the numbers I found. A woman answered, and when I told her I was Robert Miller's daughter, she went silent and then hung up on me. But before she hung up, I managed to hear her say, "It can't be. He said he didn't have any children." I stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. He said he didn't have any children. Robert, my husband of 30 years, Eileen's father, had denied her existence to someone else. The next message was even worse. Mum, I researched the address that said second family. I went there. It is a nice house in the Rosewood neighborhood. I knocked on the door and a woman in her 50s opened it. When I asked her if she knew Robert Miller, she turned pale. She told me she was his wife. His wife. Robert had been married to another woman. For how long? I did not know, but the fact was there, recorded in my daughter's broken voice. The woman's name is Patrice. She has 2 children with Dad, Mum, 2 children, a boy of 15 and a girl of 12. When I told her I was his daughter too, she fainted. She literally fainted. My legs gave way and I sat down again. Robert had not only had another woman, he had had other children. A complete family he had kept secret for years. Message number 20 explained how Eileen had discovered all this. Mum, after Dad died, I could not sleep. I kept coming here to the office at night, trying to feel close to him. One night I decided to look through everything more thoroughly, to organize his papers better for when we were ready to sell. That's when I found the safe behind the filing cabinet. The code was my birthday. Of course, it was her birthday. Robert had always been sentimental about important dates. I never imagined he would use that combination to protect such devastating secrets. I continued listening, message after message, as my world completely fell apart. Eileen had spent days investigating, trying to understand her father's double life. She had found statements for bank accounts I did not know about. She had discovered that Robert had been regularly sending money to Patrice and her children. Message number 43 broke my heart. Mum, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know if I should tell you. Dad did not just have another family. The money he sent them, the money to maintain that other house, that other life, he was taking it from our accounts. From the money you earned with your baking, from the money we had saved for my college. For years, Mum, for years he stole from you to maintain his other family. I put my hands to my face and cried, as I had not cried since Robert's funeral. But these were not tears of grief for a beloved husband. They were tears of betrayal, of humiliation, of rage. 30 years of marriage, 30 years believing I knew the man I shared my bed, my table, my life with. 30 years being a fool who worked day and night to help maintain our home, unaware that my money was financing my husband's betrayal. But the messages did not end there. When I got to message number 60, Eileen's voice changed. She no longer sounded just sad or confused. She sounded terrified. Mum, I think someone is following me. Since I went to talk to Patrice, I've seen the same car parked near our house. A man followed me to the grocery store yesterday. I'm scared, Mum. I'm very scared. I continued playing the messages with shaking hands. Eileen's voice became more desperate with each recording, and I sank deeper into a reality I had never imagined possible. Message number 65 chilled my blood. Mum, the man who was following me approached me today. He was waiting for me outside the bank when I left after making a deposit. He is tall, wears a black suit, and has a scar on his left cheek. He told me he knew I had been investigating Dad's affairs and that it could bring me trouble. I paused the recording and stood up, pacing the small office. What kind of life had Robert been leading? What kind of people had he gotten involved with? I continued with the next message. The man told me Dad owed money to someone very dangerous. A lot of money. $400,000, Mum. He said Dad had promised to pay before he died, but that obviously the debt did not go with him to the grave. He asked me if I knew where that money was. $400,000. A sum we had never had, not even when the shop was doing better. My head was spinning trying to process all this information. Mum, I told him I didn't know anything about any debt, that Dad never told us about it. Then he smiled at me in a way that gave me chills and said, Well, you better find out fast, because now the debt belongs to you and your mum. My breath caught. Eileen and I had inherited a debt of $400,000 to dangerous people, and we did not even know it. The next message explained more. Mum, I investigated more about this debt. Apparently, Dad borrowed that money to buy the properties I found in the documents. But instead of using the money for that, he spent it on maintaining Patrice and her children for years. The house they live in, the children's private schools, Patrice's new car, all paid for with money borrowed from people who do not forgive. Robert had borrowed almost $500,000 and had spent it on his other family, leaving us with the debt. The betrayal was so deep it was hard to breathe, but message number 70 completely destroyed me. Mum, I went to confront Patrice. I told her about the debt and the threats. Do you know what she told me? That she knew about the debt, that Robert had told her everything before he died, but had assured her that you and I would take care of paying because we were the fools who believed we were his main family. Those were her exact words, Mum. The fools. I sat down on the office floor and cried until I had no more tears. My entire marriage had been a lie. Robert had not only cheated on me with another woman, but he had used me as his financial backup plan. While I worked day and night making cakes and pastries to supplement our income, he was spending that money on maintaining his real family and laughing at me with his mistress. Message number 75 explained why Eileen had disappeared. Mum, the man with the scar came back. This time he was not alone. There were 3 of them, and they surrounded me when I left work. They told me they had a proposal. If I disappeared forever, if I never came home and never told you about the debt, they would leave you alone. They said a 62-year-old woman working in baking could never pay $400,000. But if I left and never came back, they would consider the debt settled. My daughter had disappeared to protect me. She had sacrificed herself so I would not have to face those dangerous men. Mum, I could not tell you the truth about Dad when he had just died. I could not destroy you with all this information when you were barely processing his loss. And I could not expose you to the danger of that debt either, so I made the most difficult decision of my life. The following recordings explained how Eileen had planned her disappearance. She had secretly sold her jewelry and some valuables to get cash. She had researched small towns where she could live without a trace. She had prepared everything to leave forever. Mum, I programmed my phone to send you a message after exactly 6 months. I wanted you to have time to heal a little from Dad's death before knowing the truth. And I wanted to make sure the men were no longer watching you. Message number 80 broke my heart. Mum, if you are listening to this, it means 6 months have passed and I hope you're okay. I hope you've been able to move on without me. I know it must be horrible not knowing what happened to me, but it was the only way to keep you safe. Eileen had calculated everything. Even in the most desperate moments of her life, she had thought of me first. The documents you need are in the safe. The code is my birthday, 08031995. All the evidence of what Dad did is there. All the properties he bought with borrowed money. All the documents of the other family. I stood up and looked for the filing cabinet Eileen had mentioned. Indeed, behind it was a small safe embedded in the wall, almost invisible in the shadows. I dialed Eileen's birthday, 08031995. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, I found exactly what Eileen had described. Wads of bills, property documents, contracts, and a thick folder labelled Patrice and Family. There was also a notebook in Robert's handwriting where he had noted all the payments he had made to his other family for years. But what impacted me the most was a handwritten letter addressed to me in Robert's handwriting. It was dated a week before his death. Mary Jensen, if you are reading this, it is because I am gone and someone found my secrets. I know there is no excuse for what I did. I know I lied to you for years and that I used your money to maintain Patrice and my other children. I know I deserve your hatred. I continued reading with trembling hands. Patrice got pregnant 18 years ago, when you and I were going through a rough patch. Instead of confessing my infidelity to you, I decided to keep that family a secret. At first, it was just money for the baby, but after that, Patrice asked me for more and more. She threatened to tell you everything if I did not help her. Robert had been blackmailed by his mistress for years, but that did not justify him using my money to pay her. When the second child was born, Patrice demanded a house, a car, private schools. I did not have that money, so I borrowed from people I later discovered were very dangerous. I thought I could pay with the shop's profits, but it was never enough. The letter continued explaining how the debt had grown with interest, how Robert had kept borrowing more money to pay previous debts, and how he had finally become trapped in a vicious circle. The stress of maintaining this lie for so many years made me sick. The doctors said my heart could not take it anymore. I know I am going to die soon, and I know I am leaving this problem to you and Eileen. I am sorrier than words can express. At the end of the letter, Robert had written something that made me boil with rage. Patrice knows about the debt. I told her that if something happened to me, you and Eileen would take care of it. She agrees because she says you were the ones who benefited from living with me all these years. The ones who benefited, as if having been cheated and stolen from for 30 years was a benefit. I returned to Eileen's phone to listen to the last messages. Her voice in the final recording sounded resigned but determined. Mum, I know this is going to hurt you, but you need to know the whole truth so you can make the best decisions. The money in the safe is $50,000 that I was able to recover from one of Dad's accounts before Patrice emptied the rest. Only $50,000 of a $400,000 debt. There are also documents that show some of the properties still have value. If you sell them, you could perhaps raise $200,000 more. It is not enough to pay the whole debt, but it is something. Eileen's last message broke my heart. Mum, please forgive me for abandoning you this way. Please understand it was the only way to keep you safe. I am going to disappear forever, but I want you to know I love you more than you could ever imagine. You have been the best mother in the world, and you did not deserve any of this. Take good care of yourself and please try to be happy. Life is too short to waste its suffering over Dad's lies. I remained sitting in that cold, silent office, surrounded by the secrets and lies of a man I thought I knew. My daughter had sacrificed herself to save me from a debt I did not even know I had, from criminals I had never heard of. But Eileen did not know something I had just discovered among the papers in the safe. There was an address on a separate paper, written in different handwriting, and a note that said, "If something goes wrong, she is here." Eileen had not disappeared forever. She had left a clue for me to find her. The address on the paper was written in a handwriting I did not recognize, but something in my gut told me it was important. Maplewood Town, Luna Street, number 243. If something goes wrong, she is here. There was no further explanation, just those words, scribbled on a yellowish piece of paper. Maplewood was a 3-hour drive from the city. It was a small town in the mountains, the kind of place where one could disappear without attracting attention, the perfect kind of place to hide. I put all the documents and the money in my purse. I did not know if it was safe to leave them in the office, especially now that I knew dangerous people were involved in this whole affair. Before leaving, I played Eileen's phone one more time, recording a voice note for her in case she could ever hear it. "Eileen, my love, if you ever hear this, I want you to know I understand why you did what you did. And I want you to know that I'm going to find you. I arrived home when dawn was breaking. I had not slept all night, but the adrenaline kept me awake. I needed to plan my trip to Maplewood, but first I had to make sure I was prepared for what I might find there. I took all the documents out of the safe and spread them on the dining table. There was much more than I had been able to look through at the office. Bank statements showing regular transfers of $5,000 a month to Patrice's account for the last 15 years. Invoices for private schools, health insurance payments, even receipts for family vacations Robert had paid for his other family. $75,000 a year for 15 years. More than $1 million that had left our accounts without me realizing it. How could I have been so blind? How had I not noticed that so much money was missing? But then I remembered how our marriage worked. Robert handled all the finances. I handed over the profits from my baking, and he took care of paying all the bills and managing the savings. He gave me an amount for my personal expenses, and I never questioned the rest. I trusted him completely. Among the papers, I found something that chilled my blood. A life insurance policy in Robert's name for $500,000. A policy I did not know about and of which I was the beneficiary. Robert had planned his financial death. He knew his heart was failing. He knew he was going to die and had taken out an insurance policy so I could pay his debt after his death. But there was a problem. The policy was dated only 2 months before his death. Insurance companies do not pay if the insured dies so soon after taking out the policy, especially if they had pre-existing medical conditions. I called the insurance company from my phone. After waiting 20 minutes on the line, a representative confirmed what I feared. The policy had been denied because Robert had not disclosed his heart condition at the time of purchase. There was no $500,000 waiting for me. I only had the $50,000 from the safe and the properties Eileen had mentioned. I spent the rest of the morning researching the value of those properties online. There were 3 plots of land on the outskirts of the city and a small house in a middle-class neighborhood. If I was lucky and sold them quickly, they could give me about $200,000, just as Eileen had calculated. But $250,000 was still $150,000 less than Robert owed. At 2:00 p.m., I got into my car and began the journey to Maplewood. I did not know what I expected to find there, but it was the only clue I had to find Eileen. The road to Maplewood wound through the mountains, gradually climbing between pines and rocks. It was a beautiful landscape that under other circumstances I would have enjoyed, but my mind was completely focused on what awaited me at the end of the trip. Would Eileen really be at that address? Or would it be another disappointment, another false lead in this endless nightmare? Maplewood turned out to be exactly what I had imagined. A small town with a main street, a few shops, a gas station, and houses scattered among the trees. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and outsiders attract attention immediately. I found Luna Street without difficulty. It was a quiet residential street, with small houses and well-kept gardens. Number 243 was a wooden house painted light blue, with a small porch and flower pots in the windows. I parked on the street and sat for a few minutes observing the house. There were no signs of life, no cars in the garage. The curtains were closed. Finally, I summoned the courage and knocked on the door. The woman who opened it was about 60 years old, grey hair pulled back in a ponytail, and very gentle blue eyes. She looked at me with curiosity, but without alarm. "Can I help you with something?" she asked me. "I am looking for my daughter," I said, and my voice broke a little. "Her name is Eileen. I think she might be here." The woman's expression changed immediately. Her eyes filled with compassion, and she opened the door wider. "You must be Mary Jensen," she said softly. "I am Kathy Jones. Eileen told me a lot about you. Please, come in." I followed Kathy into a small, cozy living room. On the coffee table there was a photo of Eileen smiling, and my heart filled with hope and pain at the same time. "Where is she?" I asked. Kathy sat in front of me and took my hands. "Eileen is fine," she said, and I felt as if I could breathe for the first time in 6 months. "She is alive and she is safe, but there are some things you need to know before you see her." "What thing?" I asked, although part of me feared the answer. Kathy sighed deeply. "Eileen arrived here 5 months ago, broken and terrified. She told me the whole story about her father, about the debt, about the threats. But she also told me something else, something she did not put in those recordings because she was afraid of how you would react." "What?" I whispered. "Mary Jensen, Robert did not die of a natural heart attack." Kathy's words hit me like lightning. I remained paralyzed, processing what I had just heard. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask. Kathy got up and brought a folder from a nearby desk. Eileen investigated more after discovering the debt. She spoke with the doctor who attended Robert in his last days. She reviewed the medical reports. She asked questions that a daughter has the right to ask. She opened the folder and showed me several medical documents. Robert had heart problems, that is true, but the medications he was taking were not for the heart. They were medications that, combined with alcohol, can cause a heart attack that looks natural. I stared at the papers without fully understanding. "Robert was being slowly poisoned," Kathy continued. "Someone had been putting those medications in his food or drinks for weeks before his death." "Who?" I asked, although deep down I was already beginning to suspect the answer. "Patrice," Kathy said simply. "Patrice knew Robert could no longer keep borrowing money. The lenders were pressuring, threatening to hurt the whole family if he did not pay, so she decided to kill him and let the insurance policy pay the debt." "But the policy was rejected," I said weakly. She did not know that. Robert had lied to her about the policy conditions, just as he lied to you about everything else. I sank into the sofa, feeling as if the world was spinning around me. Robert had not only been a liar and a swindler, he had been murdered by his mistress, who had then planned for me to pay both their debts. "There is more," Kathy said softly. "Eileen has evidence. She found the medications at Patrice's house. She found text messages where Patrice talked to someone about resolving the problem with Robert permanently. She has everything documented. Why did she not go to the police? I asked. Kathy looked at me sadly. Because Patrice threatened to kill her too, and then you. She said if Eileen spoke, you two would suffer the same fate as Robert. I understood then why Eileen had fled. She was not just protecting me from a debt, but from a murderer. Where is Eileen now? I asked. Kathy smiled for the first time since this conversation began. She is at work. She got a job at the town library. We thought it was the safest place for her. Quiet and low profile. She will be home at 6 o'clock. I looked at my watch. It was 4:30 p.m. Kathy, I said, I need to ask you something very important. Did Eileen know you were going to tell me all this? Kathy nodded. She asked me to tell you everything if you ever came looking for her. She said you deserved to know the complete truth, but that she did not have the courage to tell you directly. I leaned back on the sofa, feeling completely exhausted, but also relieved. My daughter was alive. She was safe, and in an hour and a half, I would see her again. But I had also just discovered that my husband had been murdered by his mistress, who was now free, and probably thinking about how to get rid of the only witnesses to her crime. At exactly 6 o'clock, I heard the sound of a key in the front door. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. Kathy had prepared tea for me, and we had talked more about the situation, but nothing had prepared me for this moment. I heard steps in the hallway, and then a familiar voice I had not heard in 6 months. Kathy, I'm home. How was your day? Eileen, Kathy said softly, there is someone here who wants to see you. The steps stopped. There was a long silence, and then Eileen appeared in the doorway of the living room. She was thinner, her hair was shorter and blonde instead of her natural brown, but her eyes were still the same. Those large, expressive eyes that had looked at me with love for 28 years. Mom, she whispered, and her voice broke. I got up from the sofa so fast I almost fell. I ran toward her and hugged her with all my strength, as if I could protect her from all the pain we had suffered during these months apart. Eileen cried in my arms like a small child. I cried too, but these were different tears from all the ones I had shed in recent months. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of pure love. I thought I would never see you again, she said between sobs. Me too, I whispered in her ear. But I'm here now, my love. I'm here. We stayed hugged for several minutes, not speaking, just feeling the relief of being together again. Kathy watched us from the kitchen with a smile, giving us the space we needed. Finally, we separated and sat on the sofa, Eileen holding my hands as if she was afraid I would disappear. Kathy told me you found the messages, Eileen said, wiping her tears. I found them, I confirmed. All 87. Eileen closed her eyes in pain. I am so sorry I lied to you about where I was going. I am so sorry I made you suffer, thinking something terrible had happened to me. You don't have to apologize, I told her firmly. You did what you thought was best to protect me. But now we are together and we are going to solve this. Mum, Eileen said, her voice full of worry, Patrice is still out there. The men who threatened me are still out there. It is not safe that you came here. Kathy told me about Patrice, I said, about what she did to your father. Eileen's eyes filled with fresh tears. Mum, Dad was not a good man, but he did not deserve to die like that, and we do not deserve to bear the consequences of his lies. You are right, I told her, and we are not going to bear them. Eileen looked at me in confusion. What do you mean? I got up and went for my purse, taking out all the documents I had found in the safe. I have all this, I said, showing her the papers. I have proof of the money transfers, the properties, everything your father did. And you have proof that Patrice murdered him. But, Mum, we can't go to the police. Patrice threatened to kill us if we spoke. We are not going to the police, I said, and I saw her eyes widen in surprise. We are going directly to Patrice. What? Eileen turned pale. Mum, that is very dangerous. Listen to me, I told her, sitting next to her and taking her hands. Patrice killed your father because she thought the insurance policy would pay the debt. But the policy was rejected. That means she has no way to pay the $400,000 either. Eileen nodded slowly, starting to understand. The same men who threatened you are now pressuring her, I continued. She is in the same situation as us, but with the difference that she is a murderer, and we have proof of that. Are you suggesting we blackmail her? Eileen asked, incredulously. I am suggesting we offer her a deal, I said. She leaves us alone forever, moves away with her children, and never contacts us again. And we do not turn over the evidence that she murdered your father. Eileen thought for a moment. But, Mum, what about the debt? Even if Patrice leaves, the lenders will keep looking for the money. I have been thinking about that too, I told her. I have the $50,000 from the safe, and I can sell the properties for another $200,000 approximately. That is $250,000. That is still missing $150,000, Eileen pointed out. Exactly. But Patrice has access to money too. The house where she lives is worth at least $200,000. Her car is new, probably worth $30,000, and she has jewelry, furniture, valuable things. Eileen's eyes began to shine with understanding. We are going to propose that she liquidate everything she has to complete the debt payment. Exactly, I said. She pays her part of the debt. We pay ours, and we are all free. The alternative for her is jail for murder. Mum, Eileen said after a moment. That could work, but confronting her is still very dangerous. That is why we are not going to confront her alone, I told her. We are going to do it in a public place, with witnesses around. And we are going to have a copy of all the evidence in the hands of someone we trust, with instructions to deliver it to the police if something happens to us. Kathy, who had been listening from the kitchen, approached us. I can be that trusted person, she said. I can keep the evidence and make sure it reaches the authorities if you do not return. Eileen looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. Mum, this is very risky. Are you sure you want to do it? Eileen, I told her, taking her face in my hands. For 6 months, I lived without knowing if you were alive or dead. For 30 years, lived with a man who lied to me and stole from me every day. I am not going to spend the rest of my life running and hiding because of other people's lies and crimes. Eileen's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of pride. You are right, she said. It is time we faced this. We spent the rest of the night planning exactly how we were going to approach Patrice. We decided the perfect place would be the mall where she worked, at the clothing store where Eileen had discovered she was a supervisor. It was a public place, with security, and where she could not react violently without exposing herself. Kathy helped us make copies of all the documents and evidence. She also lent us a small recorder to document our conversation with Patrice. What if she refuses? Eileen asked as we reviewed our plan one last time. Then we carry out our threat, I said simply. We give her 24 hours to reconsider, and if she does not accept, we turn everything over to the police. And what if she accepts, but does not keep her part? Then we also turn over the evidence. This is her only chance to avoid jail, and she knows it. The next morning, Kathy lent us her car to return to the city. I had decided it was safer to use a vehicle Patrice would not recognize, just in case she had spies watching. The return journey felt endless. Eileen was in the passenger seat, reviewing our plan and the evidence we were carrying over and over. I drove, trying to remain calm, but inside I was terrified. It was not fear for myself. It was fear for Eileen. Fear that something would go wrong and I would lose her again. This time, forever. "Mom," Eileen said suddenly, interrupting my thoughts. "Yes, my love. I want you to know that these 6 months away from you were the hardest of my life. Every day I wondered if I had made the right decision." "And what do you think now?" I asked her. Eileen looked at me with a small but determined smile. "Now I think maybe it was necessary for us to go through this to get to this point, to be strong enough to face the truth and fight for our freedom." "I think the same," I told her, and for the first time in months, I felt something akin to hope. We arrived in the city at 2:00 p.m. Patrice worked until 6:00, so we had time to mentally prepare and go over our plan one last time. We parked at the mall at 5:30 and walked toward the store where Patrice worked. Eileen wore a baseball cap and sunglasses so as not to be recognized immediately, and I carried a hidden recorder in my purse. Through the store window, we could see Patrice assisting a customer. She looked exactly as I had imagined her, tall, blonde, with that artificial beauty that had captivated my husband for so many years. "Are you ready?" Eileen asked me. I took a deep breath and nodded. It is time for Patrice to pay for what she did. We entered the store just as Patrice finished assisting her last customer of the day. The moment she saw us, her face completely transformed. The professional smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of absolute shock. Eileen was there, and then her gaze turned toward me. Mary Jensen. "Hello, Patrice," I said with a calm I did not know I had. "We need to talk to you." Patrice looked around nervously. The store was empty except for us, but the lights were still on and the mall still had people circulating. "I don't know what you want to talk about," she said, but her voice was trembling. "I think you do know," Eileen replied, taking off her sunglasses. "We know what you did to my father." The color completely drained from Patrice's face. She clung to the counter as if she needed physical support. "I don't know what you're talking about," she repeated, but she no longer sounded convincing. I took out one of the medicine bottles from my purse, the same one Eileen had found hidden in Patrice's house. "Digitoxin," I said, reading the label. "Combined with alcohol, it can cause a heart attack that looks completely natural in a person with heart problems." Patrice remained completely motionless, looking at the bottle as if it were a venomous snake. "We also have the text messages," Eileen continued, "the ones you sent, talking about resolving the problem with Robert permanently. And we have the bank statements," I added, "all the records of how Robert used our money to maintain you and your children for years." Patrice finally found her voice, but it came out as a hoarse whisper. "What do you want?" I took one step closer to her, keeping my voice low but firm. "We want this to end, for all of us." "I don't understand." "It is simple," Eileen said. "You have a problem. The same men who threatened me are now pressuring you for the $400,000 debt. The insurance policy was rejected, so you have no way to pay." Patrice nodded slowly, her eyes moving between the two of us as if she was calculating her options. "We also have a problem," I continued. "Those same men think we owe the debt too. But we have something you do not have," Eileen added. "We have evidence that you murdered my father." Patrice brought a hand to her throat, as if she could not breathe. "So we are going to make you a proposal," I said. "A proposal that you will find convenient to accept." "What proposal?" Patrice murmured. I took out my phone and showed her the photos of all the documents we had found. We are going to pay $250,000 of the debt by selling the properties Robert bought with borrowed money and using the savings we found. You are going to pay the other $150,000, Eileen continued, by selling your house, your car, and everything you have of value. I can't do that, Patrice protested. I have 2 children. We need a place to live. You should have thought about that before murdering their father, I said coldly. Patrice flinched at my words. Once the debt is completely paid, I continued, you leave the city, move far away with your children, and never contact us again. You never mention our names. And we never turn over the evidence of your crime to the police, Eileen finished. Patrice remained silent for a long moment, processing our proposal. And if I refuse, she finally asked. Then tomorrow we turn over all the evidence to the authorities, I said without hesitation. The medications with your fingerprints, the text messages, the medical records that prove Robert was poisoned, everything. You will spend the rest of your life in jail for murder, Eileen added, and your children will grow up knowing their mother is a killer. Patrice's eyes filled with tears. Robert promised me the insurance policy would cover everything. He said that when he died, I would have $500,000 to pay the debt and start over. But Robert lied to you, I said, just like he lied to all of us. I didn't want to kill him, Patrice whispered. But the lenders said that if Robert did not pay soon, they were going to hurt my children. They were going to hurt all of us. That was not your decision to make, Eileen said, her voice full of pain. He was my father. Patrice covered her face with her hands and began to cry. How much time do I have? She asked between sobs. 3 weeks, I replied. 3 weeks to liquidate everything you have and get your share of the money. And after that? You disappear. You leave the city and never come back. Patrice looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something akin to regret in her eyes. Mary Jensen, I know there is nothing I can say for you to forgive me. I know I ruined your life. You did not ruin my life, I told her firmly. Robert ruined my life. You just ruined yours. Patrice nodded slowly. I accept, she finally said. I accept your proposal. Good, I said, taking a paper out of my purse. This is a simple contract that explains our agreement. You are going to sign it. Patrice quickly read the document and then signed with trembling hands. Patrice, I said before leaving, if you try to trick us, if you try to run away without paying, or if something happens to either of us, this evidence goes straight to the police automatically. I understand, she murmured. And one more thing, Eileen added. If you ever try to contact our families, if you ever mention our names, or if you ever return to this city, there will be no more deals. You will go straight to jail. Patrice nodded vigorously. You will never see me again, she promised. We left the store in silence. It was not until we were in the car that I could finally breathe normally again. Do you think she will keep her word? Eileen asked. She will keep her word, I said with certainty. She has no other option. And she did. 3 weeks later, Patrice had sold her house, her car, and everything she had of value. She had gathered exactly $150,000. We had sold Robert's properties, and along with the money from the safe, we had our $250,000. We met with the lenders at a bank, in the presence of witnesses and security cameras. We handed over the $400,000 in cash and signed documents that completely released us from any debt related to Robert. A week later, Patrice and her children moved to another state. We never heard from her again. 6 months have passed since then. Eileen and I sold the house where I lived with Robert and bought a small house near Maplewood, not far from where Kathy lives. It is a quiet place, surrounded by mountains, where we can start over. Eileen got a job as a librarian in the town, and I opened a small bakery. We earn less money than we had before, but it is clean money, honestly earned. At night, sometimes we sit on the porch and talk about everything we went through. About Robert, about the lies, about the months we were separated. But we no longer talk with pain. We talk with the peace of those who have faced the truth and have come out the other side stronger. Eileen once asked me if I missed the life I had before, if I missed believing that Robert was a good man and that we had a happy marriage. No, I told her without hesitation. I prefer a painful truth over a comfortable lie. And are you not angry about all the time we lost? She asked me. The time was not lost, I replied. It brought us here. It taught us that we are stronger than we thought. Sometimes, very rarely, I think about Patrice. I wonder how she is, if her children are well, if she managed to rebuild her life somewhere far from here. I do not feel sorry for her, but I do not feel hate either. Hatred requires energy, and I prefer to use my energy to build this new life we have. Kathy comes to visit us every Sunday. She has become the grandmother Eileen never had and the friend I needed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Eileen had not found refuge in her house, if she had not had someone to protect her during those difficult months. But I do not like to think about the what-ifs. I prefer to focus on what is. Two women who learned that true family does not always come from blood, but from those who choose to stay by your side when everything falls apart. Yesterday, while I was baking bread for the bakery, Eileen came into the kitchen and hugged me from behind. "I love you, Mum," she said. "I love you too, my girl," I replied. And for the first time in years, those words felt completely free of lies, of secrets, of pain. We are free. Finally, we are free.